As the final decades of the 15th century commenced, the world stood on the brink of extraordinary transformation. Merely a few decades earlier, the Byzantine Empire had succumbed to the Ottoman Empire, culminating in the conquest of Constantinople. In 1453, this event not only altered the political dynamics, but also reshaped the mercantile landscape. The Ottoman Empire, being a Muslim entity, was not inherently opposed to engaging in trade with Christians. However, Europeans were generally reluctant to pursue commerce with them. The Silk Road, which had facilitated trade with Europe for 15 centuries, was now effectively closed. Although Europeans had contemplated traversing westward across the Atlantic to access Asia for some time, such endeavors had not been undertaken due to a lack of necessity. Amidst this backdrop emerged the newly unified Kingdom of Spain. Prior to 1469, the Iberian Peninsula was divided between territories governed by Muslims and those ruled by Christians. The Umayyad dynasty had established dominance over much of the peninsula in 711, and by the close of the 10th century, a significant portion of the population in these regions had converted to Islam. Nevertheless, Jews and Christians were not. Excluded as fellow people of the Book, Muslims were obligated to accept and even safeguard them, albeit with the imposition of additional taxes. Many Christians, however, opted to reside in the smaller northern kingdoms that were free from Muslim governance. The kingdoms of Navarre, Leon, and others persisted, seizing every opportunity to expand their territories. In the 13th century, Portugal emerged from both Muslim lands and parts of Leon, establishing itself as a significant power in the forthcoming colonial competition. Over the centuries, the remaining kingdoms engaged in conflicts and formed alliances, ultimately coming under the dominion of the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile. The union of these two kingdoms was solidified through the marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon in 1469, resulting in the formation of the Kingdom of Spain. They became known as the Catholic monarchs, due to their conquests in the name of God and the Church. As they expanded their territorial control, they expelled all Muslims and mandated the Jews either convert or depart. By the time they extended their patronage to Columbus in 1492, they had successfully subdued the last Muslim stronghold on the peninsula, the Emirate of Granada. Spain was now ideally positioned to initiate its expansion beyond the Iberian Peninsula, and undermining the Ottoman Empire appeared to be a strategic method for establishing their own dominance. Christopher Columbus had been seeking support and financing for a westward voyage across the Atlantic for several years. He initially approached Portugal in 1484, but they focused their resources on expeditions around the southern tip of Africa. Columbus then sent his brother, Bartholomew, to England in hopes of securing funding from Henry VII. However, Bartholomew was captured by pirates en route, and by the time he was released, Columbus had already secured Spanish backing. Columbus first presented his proposals to the Catholic monarchs in 1486, who deemed them unlikely but were intrigued enough to provide him with a stipend, as well as free food and lodging throughout Spain, to deter him from seeking support elsewhere. His plans were relatively simple: to sail westward with the trade winds. Until reaching Asia, it was widely accepted at the time that it was feasible to reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic, as the spherical nature of the Earth was common. Columbus's endeavors have been recognized since the 3rd century BCE, particularly through the writings of the Greek philosopher Eratosthenes. The notion that Columbus aimed to validate this concept gained traction through Washington Irving's biography of the explorer, yet this portrayal is entirely fictional. The critical unknown was the distance separating the western coast of Europe from the eastern coast of Asia. Columbus estimated this distance to be around 4,400 kilometers, 2,800 miles, from the Canary Islands to Japan. However, the actual distance is approximately 19,600 kilometers, 12,200 miles. He significantly underestimated the Earth's size by nearly one. With a lucrative agreement from the Spanish monarchy, Columbus embarked on his journey on the 3rd of August, 1492. He was bestowed the title of Admiral of the Ocean, Sea, and granted a 10% share of all profits generated from the expedition. Additionally, he was preemptively appointed governor of any territories he claimed for Spain. The expedition comprised 3 vessels: the Santa Maria, the Santa Clara commonly referred to as the Nina, and the Pinta, whose original name has been lost to history. Although these ships were relatively small, they were well equipped for the voyage. Numerous legends surround this inaugural journey, including tales of violent storms and crew mutinies. However, these accounts are unfounded. Columbus's journals reveal that they experienced nearly ideal weather conditions and calm seas for the majority of the voyage. While it is plausible that the crew expressed typical grievances, there is no evidence to suggest that mutiny was a concern. The duration of the journey is frequently misrepresented. Although they departed from Spain on the 3rd of August, they were delayed for several weeks due to necessary repairs on the Pinta at the Canary Islands, and did not commence their transatlantic crossing until the 6th of September. The landfall was recorded on 12 October, indicating that the voyage lasted 36 days, or just over 5 weeks. The island where they arrived, which Columbus designated as San Salvador, was located in the Bahamas. Upon their arrival, they were met by some of the island's inhabitants, members of the Arawak tribe. These individuals did not conform to the Europeans' expectations. The apparent Bronze Age culture of the Arawak and Taino peoples contrasted sharply with the descriptions they had received about China or Japan. The Europeans observed the absence of wheels and draft animals on the islands. The food and crops they encountered, such as maize and yams, were unfamiliar to European trade. Nevertheless, there was no definitive evidence to suggest they were not in or near Asia. It was possible that the islanders had limited interaction with the mainland. This uncertainty was somewhat overshadowed by the discovery of gold by the Spanish sailors. Some of the islanders adorned themselves with small golden ornaments in their ears and noses, which led the Europeans to believe they were on the verge of discovering immense wealth. Columbus compelled several Arawak individuals to accompany him as guides to the source of this treasure. They led him to the island now known as Cuba, and subsequently to Hispaniola, where he received a gold mask from a local chief. The expedition lingered in the vicinity, likely fostering relationships with the natives while searching for the gold's origin. During this period, on Christmas Eve, the Santa Maria ran aground, presenting both a challenge and an opportunity. With only 2 ships available, there was insufficient space for all of Columbus's crew to return, yet this allowed those who remained to continue their quest for gold and hopefully establish a positive rapport with the locals. The remains of the Santa Maria were repurposed to construct a small settlement named Navidad in honor of Christmas. 39 men chose to make this their new, albeit temporary, residence. After organizing these arrangements, Columbus navigated the 2 ships around the island, collecting valuable items to present to his patrons included local crafts, some adorned with gold, examples of plant life, and various parrots. Accompanying these treasures were approximately 20 Arawak individuals who were forcibly taken aboard the ships and enslaved. This event also marks the first documented confrontation between Europeans and Native Americans. At an inlet that Columbus named the Bay of Arrows, the Siguayo people declined to engage in trade, leading to a skirmish in which a Spanish sailor fatally stabbed one native and another was shot with an arrow. On January 16, 1493, the ships set sail eastward to return to Spain. They arrived at the Canary Islands on February 13th and proceeded leisurely back to Barcelona to report to the King and Queen. Of the 20 natives taken, only 7 survived the journey, yet they left a significant impression on the Catholic monarchs. It remains uncertain whether Columbus was aware that he was not in or near Asia. His journals from the initial voyage indicates he believed they had reached the coast of China, while those from his third expedition reflect his conviction that they were on the shores of an immense continent previously unknown. His communications to Ferdinand and Isabella were filled with embellishments and hyperbole, portraying the land as extraordinarily fertile, the rivers as clear and sufficiently wide for navigation, and gold as abundant and easily obtainable. The effort required was minimal. He characterized the inhabitants as benevolent and eager to share all that they possessed, ultimately labeling them as naive. I could easily subjugate them with just 50 men and rule over them at my discretion. The gamble undertaken by the Catholic monarchs yielded immeasurable returns. They sanctioned a subsequent voyage, significantly increasing their investment. In late September 1493, Columbus embarked on a journey leading a fleet of 17 ships, transporting 1,200 individuals, which included soldiers, missionaries, and both men and women. Colonists destined for the inaugural settlement of the Spanish Empire in the New World.